We were wondering, like, what was this idea of being self-organized, and we were wondering how is self-organization within the Dutch art scene. And we started with a lot of like Amsterdam-based initiatives, but after this whole conversation and this symposium, much more questions like popped up and about self-organization and about the value of self-organization in an art scene. And mainly, I think, like talking out like how to build community and how to build networks around these conversations. And when this opportunity appeared of creating a new format that was going to talk about self-organization. So we decided to expand it, to expand ourselves. Welcome to Void. We don't know which number because we don't know where this is gonna go to air. But today we're together because we wanted to use this space to continue with what we have been doubting lately. We met actually in a self-organized exhibition that we made, or some people made, some months ago, and a symposium about self-organization was held in the frame of this exhibition. What was the name of it?
Of the exhibition?
Yeah.
Time is an unrenewable resource, and you know how we are with those.
Well, this exhibition was self-organized within a studio in the west of Amsterdam, and a lot of questions about self-organization were popping between us as a group. And the idea, or like this format of a symposium, came up, and we invited multiple self-initiated or self-organized initiatives to come together and talk to us. And they were broadcasted on radio, that you can listen to the SoundCloud with all of the record of this, to talk about what is being self-organized.
And what is the urgency?
And what is the urgency?
Why do people do it?
And why, exactly. And
And
how is it, and how is like to be friends and then become like colleagues and stuff like this.
So as a teaser, just to give a hint who we spoke to: W139, Hotel Mokum, Dead Darlings, Mertens Framers Project Space by Plan B, Renene, .wg, Tilde, Forbid Galerie from OT 301, and us, because we also self-organized.
Exactly. So we were wondering, like, what was this idea of being self-organized, and we were wondering how is self-organization within the Dutch art scene. And we started with a lot of like Amsterdam-based initiatives, but after this whole conversation and this symposium, much more questions like popped up and about self-organization and about the value of self-organization in an art scene. And mainly, I think, like talking out like how to build community and how to build networks around these conversations. And when this opportunity appeared of creating a new format that was going to talk about self-organization. So we decided to expand it, to expand ourselves to like other cities and a specific like situations. So we invited 3 project spaces.
Well, I think actually in the first symposium we invited them to come to us, but in this format we went to their spaces to talk within the places where they actually do the work, which was a lot of fun.
Totally.
Yeah.
It was
in
fun.
Rotterdam and Amsterdam.
But that being said, they weren't in Amsterdam, most of them. So we went to Rotterdam, and it was like a fun experience to go to their places. One of them does not have a place anymore. Or it really wasn't meant to have a place from the beginning. And the other one, we were in the place having the conversation. The first space that we're going to look into, or that we visited, was Butu. This is a collective of Retail students and graduates who were wondering out how to self-organize and how to like use what they have near to them. This was a kind of a studio space that was open to them, and all of them like came together with a lot of questions after being outside in the void of being graduates. Lol. So it was such a
We all know the void.
I'm really curious who is Butu and how do they start? How did they start and how do they self-organize?
Yeah,
we are Butu. We started this project space in January 2022. Actually, a little bit before, we already started talking about the potential that this space has, and so we are here in the mall center in the Point I mall center, and we have also studio spaces in this building. And we had, the ground floor was always been empty for some, like since I grew. And
it's like storage.
Yeah, and in December we started, talking about what we could do, and just we felt like it could be interesting to open it to the public since it's such a particular spot.
So you were friends from before?
It kind of started from sharing the studio space together. Like we kind of like dropped in one by one into this studio space, and then we all kind of saw that there's like potential. Yeah, apart from Adri doesn't have studio space yet, and we saw that there's like potential in turning the space into something. And there's also other people who were not involved into turning the space into what is now Butu.
And how and what shows do they organize?
Yeah, we basically were quite naive maybe at the beginning. We had a calendar and we invited people to like put in when they want to have a show, and then everyone put in like loads of shows, and then we were like...
we have like a show every week for a whole year. So what happened to the calendar?
So
the calendar is still there.
Yeah, it's there.
It's vaguely, we kind of stuck to it.
You are doing this to create like space for others, not necessarily to curate your own self.
No, we're not curating.
Yeah, it's also not we're not curating.
Yeah.
And it's not really fun.
It's just like facilitating for others to do stuff.
Yeah. And I think we like the idea of inviting really like friends and artists to do a show also with other people.
It's only group shows.
It's only group shows. That's a bit the only selection we did, but there's also like, and we didn't invite any like curator.
I did thought that, for instance, Butu was one of the project spaces who like did everything more intuitively, like starting with this calendar and then like opening up and just like understanding what was their position. They just started from an idea that was really big and they become like some sort of programming around this. But it always comes from like a super naive position.
The calendar seems pretty dangerous because, as they said, it filled up very fast to almost more than they could handle. But it also gives you an idea of how much need there is for space to show things in this intuitive way.
Yeah. And are they making links with the neighborhoods where they're located?
I thought it was going to be like, I don't know, there's like communal. I also saw this thing with like the neighborhood in my head or something. Like, I don't know, and it kind of happened in a different way, I feel like, than I had in my mind, you know, but I think it's just like wanting, like, yeah, I definitely.
But you have struggled with like I think that communities around like project spaces or like art spaces are like really extremely like hermetic. Yeah. Like I love your quartet because of that. Even though it's not meant to be like hermetic, but it's like just it's a good joke.
What is hermetic? So
like the art spaces like and like closed. In neighborhoods together, like people never dare to enter. Yeah. So,
but we also feel that. We feel that too. Here, we also talk about that. That's also partly why we painted the floor, for example, because we also deal with people, loads of people walking by and not entering. Like there's like a really big.
Especially in the weekend, it's really busy actually. But it's really rarely that someone just come in as if they were going in that shop.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's also what the teenagers try to tackle.
Yeah, the teenagers are like, they're like highlighting this part, which is like actually also uncomfortable, like because it's true. It's like, this is not. There's not so much like there is stuff for them, but like it's not directed towards them and also towards the people there. But we just want them to come, kind of. But we don't make things specifically for them, which I also don't think we have to do. But
it does happen that people walk in and they're like, oh, what's going on?
Yeah, true. Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, the door is...
We just don't get as much visitors as like Amsterdam or something.
The real goal.
Trying to beat that.
Well, it's quite funny that they there's always this question of how do you invite the neighborhood around or sort of community that doesn't maybe usually go to art shows, and it's also often a requirement when it comes to funding, but then a lot of big institutions with a lot of money are struggling with that a lot. And they're in a shopping mall. It's quite a funny space. In our own exhibition, we didn't really know exactly who to invite and how, because it's on an industrial terrain also. So, it's not always residential or very inviting from the beginning.
But also talks, like, I think it is interesting to problematize that project spaces do not need necessarily to engage a community, because that it's a job of something that is institutionalized. Of course, it is open for everyone, but it is labor to mediate a conversation with people who are probably not interested in this kind of processes. So I think what they're like moving around, and for instance, for some of them that are really interested in like how to make things happen or work with communities, know that this is like another labor super different than the one that happens in a project space that is looking for like facilitate spaces and moments for artists itself. So
yeah, that's what I'm wondering about. Does Butu feel like they're creating some sort of community in that sense?
But do you feel there's also some kind of community that is slowly building with people that come and show and public that often comes to your shows? Is it somehow, do you feel that with all those people you're starting to expand and become like a body of people together?
I've definitely felt Butu getting more as like kind of an entity that is like that is like really existing outside of just me knowing that it exists, kind of just through like the Instagram and then getting just like people like saying like, oh, I love Butu, you know, like when people say that I'm like, wow, that's cool, like that's like people do say that. And that's I heard that. But like also to me, or like I don't know, but that's it's kind of real. Like those moments are like really important, I think, and also just simple stuff by like just getting people that none of us know come to an opening or something, you know, or like pass by. Like it's like slow maybe, but I do feel like.
But also just acknowledging their own community. It's like if you start with your expanded community, that's really like also something really valuable from this. Even if it doesn't expand to new heads or new like viewers, you have a headquarters for immediately your own community, and that.
And there are a few people I can think of that have like come to one show because it's a friend of theirs or something, and then they've come back to another show that I don't know if they know the person. It's just because they know it's here.
I feel like if we want to have like more people that we don't know coming, but I feel like actually if I think of the purposes we did at the beginning, it's also just to have like to just keep the people we know close to us, and also to keep this community we already built like by art school close and know what they're doing and not lose the contact. So that was also one of the points.
So I think that the whole process that Butu has been having with this space is about understanding what is the reach of their own community and how it does like build up and exist, which might not be a community when you're inside of an academy and you have a community. So what happens when you come out is this the community that goes to your project space or it expands itself? So I think they're learning on the go.
It expands itself one by one, and also us reaching out to them, going there and so on is part of that. And I think that makes a lot of sense for something which is, a lot of project spaces are process-based, I guess, instead of output-based. Which, I don't know, which has its own space in the cultural scene.
But how do they bring people in to see their shows, to visit their performances?
Well, sometimes I do think that it's all right to have less people, but people who are actually going by interest, that bring a lot of people who are not going to like really reach, or at least bring a lot of people because it's a place that you can drink a beer, because have like a big percentage of self-organization, it is based on like hanging out and drinking beers and like being around, because it is a cheap place to like be around and like have conversations about what you do, like in a more kind of abstract way of thinking. So
it's also a way of just being together.
Yeah, totally.
Through enjoying company. It's also how we started.
It's like a party where people have to go because you put a lot of effort in it.
Let's ask them.
Did you talk about amongst yourselves how you want to bring people here, how parties and beers and so on relate to the work that you are doing?
We sell beers there.
Yeah, but we do try to not make it too party, I think. We do ask people to keep it until 10, actually, which is like not super late at all. Also considering that we're antikraak and we had problems with the neighbors before, and then we almost got kicked out. And we feel like we do have to be careful, and we are sharing a studio space with other artists.
So far we had mostly exhibitions of like one weekend, and not really like, now for the new open call we are also inviting people to organize concerts or one night, one evening events.
They're making use of a space that they don't have real ownership over, which is a big problem for artists in Amsterdam. Space is a super precarious thing. And then you're not allowed to do many different things, and you have to be very careful, and you have to kick people out and disrupt maybe even the flow of your own program.
Exactly. And I think that there is something like really dangerous of like these agreements, and also with this thing of like making it serious, because like there is like neighbors and people are not going to be taken serious, but people are ignoring that like itself, the whole idea of being together and not like closing the things brings people together and makes conversations happen and make like communities become. So I think that they can be in kind of a hustle, because it is such a fragile and precarious state in the one that they are. So it's like, we don't have parties because we're gonna get kicked out, but maybe if we open until 10, no one's gonna come. So it's always like a little bit on the failure side. Even though I don't think they fail, I think a lot of people actually are going to this space. It represents something different.
Yeah, it's not about failure, but it is about fragility, as you said.
But a failure definitely it is, because they're scared of like not getting there. It's not like failure itself, like, oh, you failed and this is wrong, but it is like the constant fear of failing in what they're supposed to do, that maybe they don't even know what it is, what they're supposed to do. They know what they cannot do, but they don't know what they're supposed to do. That's what I think.
But then this question of space, which, I mean, we all know is problematic in Amsterdam, and I think one of the reasons also to move or to reach out to Rotterdam, see what is going on there, and what the playground is for artist-run spaces, has to do with this question: is it different there? Is it specifically Amsterdam that's kind of closing up in a way that makes us all so heavily precarious when it comes to having spaces to organize? So in Rotterdam, we specifically went to two initiatives that do it in completely different ways. One that
more or less owns the space, no matter how small and funky it is. A shed in a backyard, which is Peach, and Galerie de Jaloezie that don't have their own space, that are nomadic.
And they actually never really function as space-based, but they were more thought as a platform for programming audiovisual content. So whatever like evolved through that is what Galerie Jaloezie is, or adds to the list of what it is.
So let's start with the Beach Rotterdam, the shed. We went there. It was cute.
It was really cute. I think it was a amazing experience to just be in this kind of like secret space that you were able to get in. Also, when we were going there, we saw like a lot of empty spaces around the city, and we were creating like a whole like ideal imaginary in our heads while we were walking there.
Where is it located?
Yeah, now we're like, then I got this house, and this shed was here, so I kind of always dreamed of having a shed actually as an art space, so when I found this thing, it was kind of like perfect, and made me want to move in here.
And how did they start making shows?
Yeah, so in the beginning, I mean, the first show, for example, was like, I was like telling my friends, hey, I want to start this, then like a really good friend of mine was like, hey, I want to do the first show, and then so that just happened like that, and then he made the show was called Small Girls, and he made some tiny paintings that he was baking in the oven, and so you have a show like this, or like just these very small paintings, and the program and like the result of the show was not really, just happened through friendship, I suppose.
I think that there was like the nice thing of Peach at the beginning, or was that it just started just to make things happen and to kind of like start activating like an environment that was a little bit like resembling an island, because as we talked with Ghislain, he was saying that being part of a Dutch art scene for a lot of international students that roam around becomes like kind of strange. So it is like, it was interesting to like learn how it started and how it has moved around and how it does like with in general all of the logistics of owning something or like mediating something.
And did their financial conditions influence the kind of programming that they were preparing for the space?
As soon as I entered the subsidy kind of like scenario, it kind of forced me to like articulate what this is about or what I want it to be about, and then it came a bit closer to my own interest. And so I made this program called Center for the Mumble, which was basically a program within Pitch, which is about this kind of autofiction.
I thought it was really nice how Ghislain was talking about the having to formulate things for funding not as a oppressive thing that you have to kind of dance for, but as a way to reflect on what you really want, formulate it, and make a next step. So,
yeah, I think all of like what we have seen from this spaces are the different moments of organization. Like Butu is completely like beginning, like trying to keep independency. Then Peach is okay, now we have to survive from this, and then we have to make something out of it. And then how are we going to like commit to understand what we're doing in an environment like this and with the conditions of a place like this?
Yeah, I wonder about does the size matter in self-organization, and what would be the size of a network of Peach?
did it change like how you work with people? Did you have to go out and make whole new networks to kind of find these artists, or?
No, because like I'm such a small structure that I can hide and actually hack, you know, like if I want to I could go to like whatever, do a trip and pay with subsidies and find a way to like, you know, nobody would notice actually. So it didn't change exactly. It's more like a subtle thing where Well, maybe it became a bit more like work actually, and also it became that I need it because it's also my income.
So what is Peach personally looking for through self-organizing?
You kind of like reach to a level that it like, okay, this is what I can do, and this is like the capacity that I have. So it takes another pace and another way to going somewhere.
I wouldn't mind also, I mean, I like paying people, by the way. Also, this is actually, before paying myself, this is also why I started, because I felt like people need to be paid, even though, you know, it's not maybe...
But you paid from the beginning, or?
How was it? No, there was nothing, and then there was a little bit, like we managed to get some little, you know, like here sometimes like neighborhood projects, you can get like a couple of thousands for a couple of projects, or 500 here. So we did a bit like that, and then I also used my own money at some point to pay actually, but that was maybe for a year, and then but it's small, you know. That's also the thing. You can do a show like with not too much and not too much logistics as well, like because it's small. So.
And since it's part of your house, you don't have to pay extra for the space.
So maybe the reason why I'm doubting is also because I arrived somewhere that I wanted, and I'm also a little bit panicking about what's
next step.
Yeah, a little bit, I suppose. And so, if I project myself looking at like, so if he wasn't here and I'm seeing this somewhere else, maybe I'd be like, fuck, you got it, you know? But then how do you, on a personal level, I often like, I'm very thankful when like friends tell me, oh wow, it's so cool what's happening, you know, like in a genuine way. Because people don't say it so much, and I also understand, like sometimes I see a wonderful exhibition and I would not necessarily like write to the artist or like there is one time I had this conversation with a friend who's like doing more like theater performance, and she was talking about the feedback that she gets that's much more rewarding.
Can I come back to this question about the MoMA actually? Would it do more if it was in the MoMA? Bigger, more people see the work? Would it do more if it was in a MoMA than if it was in a small artist-run space in a backyard in Rotterdam?
I would say I would never go for like this idea of going to the institutions at all. Like honestly, it is like what is interesting of self-organized things is that there are ways of resistance. Of course, the system eats everyone alive and they have like 5-year max of life and it's fine. But at least they lived during 5 years. And like there is this interesting thing out like positioning yourself through resistance and also through a way of surviving and existing, because making art public or making like processes of art, of culture public as your own thing, as and as a matter of your urgency, becomes a much more like, well, revolutionary way of doing things. Like,
but what do you mean by doing more?
But also just in these institutional, I guess, quantifications of how we show art, how many people are going to come, who are these people who are going to come, are the right people going to come, you know, are we going to reach new audiences, what is the cost per person who comes and sees it? There's a lot of quantification going on. Then of course MoMA obviously, or any other slightly bigger institution, wins on all of those requirements. But so do you think that every artist run space in a way, just by existing, is a space of resistance?
Of course, 100%. Like all of these quantifications are a way of like giving numbers to like something symbolical that shouldn't have like numbers, because it is a capitalist way of doing things. If things become like this, it becomes exactly like an alienating exercise of becoming an institution. That was a problem that we talked in our first conversation and symposium. That it like, why does the Netherlands tends to institutionalize project spaces? Or people have institutionalized brains and they, just because they have a website, become an institution. Like, which is not them becoming an institution, but the people who sees them imagines them as an institution, because there is no space for spontaneity that much here in Amsterdam, not in Rotterdam. Rotterdam is more chill, but like Amsterdam is a little bit like with a stick in their ass. But do you have any last question for Peach?
Of course I do.
Tell it.
Is there any internal doubting from Ghislain in Peach, or like in Peach as an organization?
This idea of progression also is really embedded in this like institutional thing, like the growth, you know. And I'm like, I don't know. Yeah.
Like we don't need to grow; we can stay doing the same.
Exactly. Yeah.
But also, do we grow upwards towards the sun, or do we grow the roots into the system and we interconnect?
Well, the visit to Peach was amazing.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was really, really refreshing as a thing for us. And then we went to eat
Really good food.
But I do think that like there was a lot of particular questions that were discussed with them, and it is interesting to see a space in that place of evolution, because I think Peach has around, I don't know, like 6 years alive, which is a lot. So a lot of things have happened.
Past the 5-year plan.
Yeah, past the 5-year plan. Congratulations. Good for them. But they're actually looking for people to start collaborating with them. And they endorsed like that question. Like if people wanted to reach out and do things with them, they're open for that.
Mm-hmm. I'm really looking forward to seeing some kind of a show or event there one time, because it's such a strange space, such a small shed that feels like it's in the mountains somewhere.
Yeah.
Not a white cube. I'm really curious what it looks like. And also to mention, they have a workshop space in the back, actually a dark room for photography, or also in the garden. So
it looks like an Old West bar. We should do a collab and do like a old theme Brokeback Mountain party there. It would be amazing.
Looking forward.
I'll
Me
invite
too.
you. It would be my proposal for Peach.
Somewhere in the 5-year plan.
For 7th anniversary.
So the last space that we visit was Galerie, Jaloezie. And we went to the house of Vera, who opened her house, which actually was the first space for this initiative. So
we're all really jealous of her house.
yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
But who is behind Galerie de Jaloezie, and how did they start?
My name is Vera Veen, and together with my friend Gijs van der Meer, who couldn't be here today, unfortunately, we started Galerie Jaloezie. By now, it's a collective for film and audiovisual art, but it started actually, we both studied visual anthropology, that's how we know each other, and after we graduated, we kind of fell in this dark pits, like, we wanted to, continue to have this fertile ground to watch films and discuss them together and to be inspired and inspire each other. So around this time, I moved from Leiden, where we studied, to Rotterdam, and I found this place where I live. And well, since it's so spacious, we were like, we have to organize something, we should do something. So through, I don't know, I guess Gijs at the time was working at like construction company, and they had to empty buildings sometimes, so they had a lot of rubbish, and then he found this screen somewhere in a container, and I had Beamer still, and we were like, okay, we have everything we need to organize film screenings. So we started doing that on Sunday evenings, and then, well, obviously we were unemployed, so we had a lot of time to think about which films we were going to screen, and then to email the filmmakers for like a screener, and we invited people through a WhatsApp group, but this WhatsApp group was also growing and growing because everybody that I met, I just added to the WhatsApp group. And every Sunday I would cook, or we would cook together and then eat together and then have the screening here. It was always like 10, maximum 15 people, I think. And then discuss the film afterwards. So yeah, that's actually how it started.
But does Galerie de Jaloezie has a curatorial vision?
We are also still looking for, what is our curational vision. I think it's also a little bit bullshit if you are like, okay, I know exactly what I'm doing. So yeah, with each event we think about it again, and maybe we adjust a bit, and maybe we know it a little bit more after we have organized it. Yeah.
So it's in the making, totally.
Yeah.
Like it's learning as you go.
Yeah, exactly. And then maybe it's important to say, because I think we have kind of two things that we focus on. Like one is, if we really have an activity where we program films, we would look for these kind of films or works. But then another thing that we find really important is to have a kind of accessible, fun, just do it DIY approach to making audiovisual work, which is why we do the 48-hour, which is why we do open calls for like work in progress works. And so that's another thing. Like, for example, with the space, when we did the open call, we didn't want to be like super highbrow and only selecting the amazing things. We thought it's really important for people to also exhibit when they're not yet completely satisfied, or
So I think that it was interesting for us to bump to up self-organized space or like initiative that was based on film, and to like unveil all of like the myths of like what is film or what is this audiovisual like self-organized spaces. And I think that they were really clear out how they were being super playful, like how they curate, and that they actually do not curate movies. They do like more audiovisual projects, so that is kind of like a way that they intertwine with like visual art and film, like audiovisual art and films. And I think that was like kind of like refreshing to see all their processes.
Yeah, for me the question of film was interesting because we talk a lot about self-organization versus institutions and how they intertwine or not and so on. But in the case of film, as Vera at some point said, it is an industry even more than we are used to from the art world. They even cannot just program certain films because then they have to pay royalties and so on. It's shows an even bigger institutionalization or commercialization than we are used to, or than our world consists of.
And I think that it is interesting because they're placing, or like what they're reproducing are things that do not enter to this kind of like a scheme. So they're like thinking on other ways to, another type of content to offer.
What do they offer to the city with their programs?
So yeah, we've been trying to find our place a little bit between also the cinema and the film industry, which is very much an industry, and then more the art scene, which is functions in a very different way. And then within this liminal space, how do we relate to these other collectives and initiatives that are already existing? And yeah, I think like by now, I think we have quite different audiences actually, and a quite different approach. So we also know each other, and we come to each other's events, and I think we're very complementary. So yeah.
So it is quite expanded, like the programming within the city of Rotterdam, of Jaloezie. Like they have reached different places, and I think that is something that happens when you don't have a space, and when you do not depend on like a physical space. You have to like find places to exist. And I think for film it becomes like a little bit more easy because it is a more simple setup that you can move around with, and that has shown like a lot how they've been moving around and how they have used this capacity of making alliances, I think, with different like scenarios or institutions.
And is it possible for them to hack the institutions from the inside when they collaborate with them?
I think it's possible to hack institutions from the inside, but you need an environment that's open for conversations about how to work with different temporalities, different ways of communication, different, expectations. Because I feel like knowing the institutional world a little bit, okay, so you start a project, you have a set amount of hours that you can spend on this project, right? Set amount of working hours. You cannot go over it because then it's unpaid. Then you have some criteria, it needs to be communicated, photographs, blah, blah, logos everywhere. And you make, okay, so already 4 months before the start of the project, you hand in your funding application, and then you get it, and then you have these and these promises that you have to take. So then when, as an institutional worker, you start working with this, grassroots initiative, you notice that maybe it didn't go according to planning because you already have your, like half a year before, you already wrote down, I'm going to do this and this and this and this, but then it's a different temporality than the group that you try to work with. And I think institutions sometimes forget that they have to show flexibility because they want to work, they are the ones who want to work with this grassroots initiative and want to, what you say, like kind of leaning into this energy that's so sexy. Ooh, people doing it from, their heart and not because it's their job. And yeah.
Did you have doubts about whether or not you should start collaborating with institutions?
From Galerie Jaloezie?
Yeah.
No, well, I mean, we're in the process, of course, of reflecting, and in the case with the Nieuwe Instituut, I didn't have doubts because I think it's a really nice program. But if we would be approached, then I would have the feeling like, oh, you just want to have, picture, and then like, look how underground we are. Then
tokenizing underground.
Yeah. So I think it's important to, kind of feel the
case by case.
Yeah. And there was a case actually that I can tell about that when we had the space, an institute approached us and they wanted to do something in the space. They had some kind of a weekend, and it was something like with an audiovisual project, and then maybe we can exhibit it for this weekend, and we were like, okay, that's cool, like let's do a collab. But they were very fierce in no, we don't want it to be a collab because, I don't know, not possible because of rules and criteria. Then we're like, okay, fine, then we're gonna charge rent because, you have so many millions, because if you don't want to make it a collab, then you're renting out your space, right? That's then.
Yeah.
And then they didn't want that either. So then we just said no, because I thought that was a bit stupid. Like, okay, so you want to associate yourself with this, anti-squat space that doesn't have heating and like, cool. You don't want to associate yourself with us, but you also don't want to pay proper.
Yeah, what the fuck?
Yeah, like any other space that you would rent, you would pay €1,000 a day to rent it out or something. So yeah.
Because you completely take attention away from you.
Well, we had to literally clear it out and there was no money. So then, I mean, it's not that we wanted money, we just wanted to work together in a cool way. But then, if that's not possible, then we want money. So then we can do our things, pay our people, and yeah.
I think that what I was more interested about, what she was like placing, was that she was around like a community of audiovisual initiatives that were supporting each other and were giving like visibility to each other. That there was one in Den Haag, one in Amsterdam.
So what would be their network of support?
Yeah. Really good question. We do have that. Okay, I think it's impossible to name all the people that we exchange with, so it's not an exhaustive link. But for example, there's this, I call it Sister Cinema Collective in The Hague. What you see is what you get. And we got in touch, and we are very much, on the same level and the same vision. And some time ago, they asked us if we wanted to have their cinema chairs that they are, they don't need anymore. So this is something really practical. Then, we talked with other initiatives. We talked a lot about, funding and how we should position ourselves. For example, in Maastricht, there's Video Power. And it also started as just connecting with each other without, having any need or something. But then you kind of become friends as collectives. Like, who are you are like me. Let's be friends. And then, so they got these funds a couple of times. So they sent us their application from a previous year for us to, look into. So that was really generous of them. Within Rotterdam, we have a lot of people who cross-post our things. The collaboration that we have with Geile Café, it's not just using the space, because it's really from a friendship and an urge from them that they want to have this in Geile Café. So it's a lot more than that. And then really we had so many really nice exchanges. We also had we borrowed some cinema chairs from Lantaarnvenster. Right now we work with Willem de Koning and people offering to do some graphic design because they are just trying things out and they think it's cool to have this platform also. So really endless positive exchanges.
I think that we have also spoken to spaces in general, and everybody who we spoke to, that are actually not so extremely aware of everything and the whole landscape of these artist-run spaces in the city, because they are putting so much work, effort, labor into setting up what they need to set up and having their own audience and so on. That for me it's an interesting contrast with Galerie Jaloezie, that this effort and labor is directed at making these networks, at understanding everything which is happening in the city and connecting to it in order to be able to move around, to have space and so on. So they are very aware of the infrastructure, cultural infrastructure of the city. I have Mariana, actually, I have a question for you, because we all started, we were all interested in self-organization and how other initiatives do it, also not to reinvent the wheel and to kind of share and exchange and map the landscape of something that we also want to do and that we are interested in. And from the beginning that we work together, you often said that compared to your experience of self-organizing in Bogota, that at least Amsterdam, maybe the Netherlands in general, has a quite individualistic, maybe hierarchical art world that is less self-organized, less spontaneous. I'm wondering, now that we spoke to the people in the symposium, to these 7, 8 or 9 artist initiatives, and to the ones that we have discussed today, did it change any way in which you looking at it now that we've spoken to them?
I think that it's not. I think that it has evolved. It hasn't changed. I think that there is this thing that of individualized realities, that it's really present. Not necessarily individualistic people, but realities where an individual is completely submerged on like their daily life and doing, which blocks a lot the building of like communities that are more like spontaneous itself. I felt in Rotterdam there was much bowliness, definitely, even if I was called an idealizing Rotterdam. But I think that there is a thing of this system that it's like there is a necessity, but it's not a primal necessity when self-organization in other places, if it doesn't exist, there is no art scene. So it is this thing like, yeah, they're not spaces, but if you also write, you can get a space in some sort of institution. Like there's always like this kind of lump that it like, I'm not gonna deeply go in there because there is always a chance to like be shown in the right places, which I find a little bit sad because people are gonna get bored of that, or they're gonna move to Berlin because people do not stay in the Netherlands so much. Truth, facts.
Is Berlin still the place?
What?
Is Berlin still the place we
And
move
the people
to?
love to love to struggle in Berlin. At least they can party.
I thought now we're just going to Rotterdam.
I'm gonna move to Rotterdam. See you there, Peach.
Is there something that can still be gentrified by us in Rotterdam?
No, I think that it's important to just try to keep going. I know that it's difficult, but it is the only way to like do things. It's actually like a nicer way to do things, self-organizing.
Yeah, and somehow maybe collecting all this information and talking to all these people, we find interest in self-organization, but we also want to find ways of supporting all this self-organization and maybe stimulate people to do it because it's important.
Yeah, just so new things happen, and like we can have every 2 weeks things happening that are like diversifying the people who are doing and thinking around, because there is so many voices that can just make things happen on their own. Even things can happen in a bar, like any space is the place to like any type of like
any scam
thing, any scam.
Any scam?
Any scam.
Any scale, any scam.
Yeah, totally. Nice. This is the end.
There will be more.
I don't know.
Formats change.